As a clinical psychologist, I consider it the highest privilege to be able to join with someone as they navigate some of the most difficult moments that they've ever faced. Medical and psychiatric illnesses, disappointments, and life changes that could throw any of us into a tailspin. The best thing about it is that I've seen hundreds of people change their lives for the better. And it leaves me in a perpetual state of awe and wonder and gratitude as I reflect on the complexity and possibility that resides within each of us. But of all the things that I've seen and heard in my work, there's one issue that keeps me up at night. It's when I meet all these amazing people whose lives have been placed on hold because they've been sold the idea that they need to solve all of their problems first before they can create anything resembling a happy or fulfilling life. And it's hard to see lives placed on hold for this reason. So many of us, myself included, have the tendency to focus with laser-like precision on fixing our deficits, our weaknesses, our pain. We can spend a lifetime focusing on the ways that we've failed ourselves and others, and the ways that others have failed us. I'm going to share with you why this is so profoundly problematic, what the science says about our ability to experience authentic positive well-being in the face of adversity, and one powerful thing that you can do to move beyond fixing, beyond surviving, and toward flourishing. You see, for the longest time, well-being was essentially defined as the lack of distress, the lack of impairment, as opposed to the presence of something. And it's completely understandable why it was thought about in this way, because 1 in 5 adults has been impacted by the distress and disability caused by mental illness in the past year alone. And the most recent study by the CDC found that suicide rates in the US have been trending upward over the past 20 years. So it is vital that we continue to understand how to prevent and reduce the suffering caused by mental illness. But it has also become increasingly clear that when we chronically focus on fixing our deficits and our problems alone, it leads many of us into a downward spiral of shame and self-loathing and hopelessness as we neglect the best of who we are. This is where the psychological science has fallen short in our understanding of well-being. And this is the very reason that exactly 20 years ago, clinical psychologist Dr. Martin Seligman founded the field of positive psychology. Dr. Seligman's call to action was that we devote the same scientific rigor to understanding the things that make life worth living, as we already do, to all the things that can go wrong with us. He referred to it as the science of human flourishing and what enables it. As the research poured in over the years from hundreds of scientists across the world, Dr. Seligman drew upon the best of it to develop what he came to call well-being theory. And in it, he identified 5 essential elements that appear to be crucial if we want to move beyond fixing and toward flourishing. And these are positive emotions, which were thought of as a signal of positive well-being and happiness. But it turns out that you can practice positive emotions to move toward positive well-being. Engagement. And I'm not talking about the ring on your finger. I'm talking about experiencing a deep sense of presence, being in the moment. Positive relationships. Cultivating them in your home, at school, and at work. Loving and being loved. Supporting and being supported. Experiencing a deep sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. Connected to something larger than ourselves. Whether it's spirituality, or nature, or your job as a calling. And having a sense of accomplishment, where you're achieving something, not necessarily for some external reward, but because it's personally important to you. And you can remember these 5 ingredients to a flourishing life by the acronym PERMA. Now, Back in 2002, I had the amazing opportunity to work with Dr. Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania. Every neuron in my brain was on fire as I learned about and then taught positive psychology. And I decided in that moment that I would spend the rest of my career helping people to get unstuck and to move toward the life that they truly envision for themselves. Now, with this concept of flourishing taking hold, a better representation of well-being began to come into focus. And I truly believe that it could change how you think about your own lives. This is called the complete state model of mental health. Now remember, in the old model, what we were doing is helping people to move from high mental illness symptoms to low mental illness symptoms. So success meant that you're now symptom-free, or that you can now cope really effectively with your problems, which is great. But that was the end of the story. But another brilliant thinker by the name of Professor Corey Keyes, who developed this model, actually found evidence for the following statement. He said, "The absence of mental illness does not translate into the presence of mental health." Can you guys say that with me? The absence of mental illness does not translate into the presence of mental health. Thank you. Those 5 elements that are so critical to flourishing well-being, they live on that vertical dimension. So fixing our problems, as important as that may be, doesn't get us anywhere near to flourishing well-being. Let's take a spin around this image, because I think it'll really help us to understand the implications of what I'm talking about. So the research so far tells us that only about 18% of us are actually flourishing, experiencing both positive well-being as well as the lack of mental illness symptoms. And these folks experience fewer physical health problems, meaning less cardiovascular disease. At work, they're more productive, and they miss fewer days of work than folks who are not flourishing. Now, the forgotten group is this 12% who also don't experience mental illness symptoms, but for some reason they're still languishing in life. So they're not suffering, but to varying degrees, they experience a sense of emotional emptiness, disconnectedness or loneliness, and a feeling of cynicism toward life. So if you're languishing, studies have found that you're actually 6 times more likely to go on to experience the symptoms of a mental illness than someone who's flourishing. Now this is important, because that means that when we actively move toward trying to feel good, to do good, to be with others that we care about, to do things that are personally meaningful to us, this is not just pleasant or nice. It's actually protective against mental illness. Now, those who are struggling may experience anxiety, depression, or other difficulties in their lives. But they've also found a reason to live and to embrace life. I love this group. I call them the struggling strivers. And what really works for them is when they double down on those aspects of their lives that are already bringing them that sense of positive well-being and seek help for the things that are causing them distress. Finally, we have those who are floundering in life. And this is the danger zone. These folks are experiencing both the presence of mental illness symptoms and the lack of the things that make life worth living. So what's important for these folks is to seek a mental health assessment from a professional as soon as possible. So what does this all tell us? If you feel empty or in pain, or if you're stuck in a never-ending cycle of coping, I want you to know that there is hope, that you can experience authentic positive well-being in the face of that adversity by tapping into that vertical dimension. And I promised you that I would share with you one powerful way that you can do just that. Now, while all these thinkers and researchers certainly changed the way that I think about mental health, the thing that truly changed my heart came from my work with a man that I'll call Alan. You see, when most people see Alan, they pretty much see his symptoms, how he would talk to himself and at times get irritated, seemingly for no reason, sometimes even scaring people. And we had been working together for about a year without much progress. And in one session, I decided I would ask Alan, instead of, what are your symptoms? What are your problems? What are the things that make you light up, Alan? What energizes you? What makes you feel like you're making a difference? Alan said he always wanted to be a teacher. So I asked him, okay, teach me something. He looked at me a bit perplexed, thought for a moment, and then asked, Doc, have you ever heard of the deep sea anglerfish? Now, I definitely had not. So he launches into this explanation. He says, the anglerfish lives in the Mariana Trench, just off the coast of Guam. It's the deepest body of water on the planet. It's so deep that no light can penetrate into its depths. And in this cold, dark, pressured environment, the anglerfish not only survives, but it thrives. And it does it by creating its own light, which it uses as kind of like this fishing lure. Wow, I said. So it creates its own light in the midst of all that darkness, huh? Alan had been floundering for a long time, experiencing both the ravages of a severe mental illness, as well as the almost complete absence of positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and any sense of accomplishment. But I could see the gears in his head turning. He looked down again, thought for a long time, and then looked up at me and screamed, I'm an anglerfish, Doc. I'm an anglerfish. I've been going through so much for so long, it feels like I've been living in my own darkness, my own trench. But I realize now that I can create my own light. Teaching makes me feel like I'm making a difference. My light in the darkness is teaching others. The revelations unfolded one after another, and my normally neutral therapeutic face probably looked more like a surprised emoji at this point. For the first time, Alan had a sense of purpose. Making a difference in the lives of others through teaching connected him to something larger than himself, connected him to his strengths. So over the following months, we focused on that vertical dimension of positive well-being. And our primary goal became to help him to find ways to enact that purpose as much as humanly possible. And before, during, and afterwards, we would talk and talk about what it meant to him and about him that he was able to take these actions in his life and do so in the face of adversity. Today, Alan's symptoms are under control. He serves in an official role as a mentor to those living with mental illnesses. He is flourishing. And his example teaches us that if he can do it, we can all move toward flourishing well-being, no matter how dark things get. Prescribing purpose means empowering you to contribute your time, your effort, your ideas, or simply your presence to something that is personally meaningful to you. The transformative power of it lies in the repetitive doing of those actions. But what really drives your positive well-being forward is when you then reflect on what those meaningful actions say about you, your strengths, and your inherent value. Whether you're languishing or floundering or struggling in the face of life's challenges, activating your sense of purpose can unleash positive emotions such as love and gratitude. It helps us to gain perspective and to feel deeply in the moment, to be present. It can also turbo boost the development of meaningful relationships. And it leaves us with the knowledge that we made a difference, that we accomplished something worthwhile, that we are worthwhile. I've continued to prescribe purpose in my life and in my work. And the truth is that, like the light of that anglerfish in the Mariana Trench, it doesn't necessarily make all of that darkness go away. But Living your purpose in the midst of your pain is both possible and a powerful route to positive well-being. Now, there's one more thing that I want to share about our friend, the anglerfish. It actually doesn't look like this at all. In fact, it looks like this. When we're feeling at our lowest, yeah, it's not pretty. When we're feeling at our lowest, when we're feeling ugly, inside and out, it's almost impossible to focus on anything beyond those thoughts, those feelings. And it's hard for our loved ones and even trained clinicians to look beyond those things as well. But those are the exact moments when we must focus on what makes us light up. Those are the exact moments when our supporters must empower us to remember, discover, and live our purpose. So here's what I need you to do. If you've been stuck in the horizontal dimension of constant self-repair, don't wait another moment before you begin moving up that vertical dimension toward the flourishing life that you deserve. I believe that we're more than the sum of our problems. And like the anglerfish, we can create a world where there's light, even where there is no light. Thank you.